So here we are at the fan bind off for Fee's Wild Child, and we are ready to start working on binding off the fan. And the first thing we're going to do is actually cast on and then bind off a stitch 3 times. And the reason we're doing this is because it creates this like chain for us to walk between the bind off parts. So we're going to do a backwards loop cast on and then bind the stitch off. We're going to do that 3 times. Now if you are someone who carries their yarn in their right hand, then for this part it's probably easiest for you to just go ahead and put it on your thumb and do the thumb cast on and then bind that stitch off. Okay, you just want it, they don't have to be perfect, but you want to have them consistently the same size. I recommend fairly loose, so don't snug them down onto your needle. So the next step after you've done that is a slip slip knit. So we're going to take this first stitch with his shawl and slip him off and identify our next stitch here. We're going to slip him also off knitwise. Now we're going to knit them together for our slip slip knit and pass over the stitch from the little chain that we made. Okay, so now we've got our first 2 stitches bound off, and we're going to do another cast on and bind off 3 times. So there's 1 and 2 and 3 times. So the next step is to do a brioche left slant decrease. So we're going to slip the first stitch in his shawl knitwise off, and then the next stitch and the following stitch with its shawl, we are going to knit those guys together. So, and then pass the first stitch with his shawl over and pass the chain over. So now we're going to do a 4 times with the cast on bind off. That's because we're coming up to the apex. We're actually going to be decreasing a 4 stitch decrease, and so we need a little bit more length to come up the side to the apex of this fan here. So we're going to be working with these stitches, and we're going to be calling them A, B, C, D, and E. And we're going to start by slipping off A and slipping off B with its shawl, and then C, no, come back here. There we go. And C is going to be placed onto a locking stitch marker, and we're going to hang him out in the back. Okay, so now we're going to knit D, and now we're going to pass B and its shawl over, and then transfer to the left needle, and we're going to pass E over, put it back on our right needle, pass A over, and C, who's been waiting patiently, is going onto our right needle, and we're going to pass this over. So now we've taken the 4 stitches and decreased them down to 1. It involves 5 stitches to do that, but we decreased a total of 4 and pass the stitch over. And so now we're at the apex of our fan. We're going to cast on and bind off 4 times again for our chain coming down the other side. That's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and now we're at where we're going to do a brioche right slant decrease. So we're going to slip the first stitch in his shawl, and the next stitch we will knit. Then we're going to pass the stitch with its shawl over, transfer to our left needle, pass the stitch with its shawl over, put on our right needle, pass our chain stitch over. Okay, so now we're going to cast on bind off 3. So there's 1, 2, and 3, and now, oh, little friendly marker hanging out. So now we're going to take the next stitch and the next stitch with its shawl, and we're going to knit these together and pass the first stitch over, and then we're going to do one more, cast on bind off 3 times, 1 and 2 and 3. So at this point we are ready to move on to the next set of the directions after you do the fan bind off. Here's your fan that you've created, and you're going to stretch that out and have a nice pointy tip, or you can make it rounder if you want, however you like.